Well, after the issues with the Washington football team, I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to say the name of this car, but here is our Jeep. I guess I'll take my chances. Right next to me is the 2014 Jeep Cherokee Trailhawk. That's the more off-road focused version of the Cherokee, but still the baby compared to the Grand Cherokee. Now, Jeeps haven't always fared super well in these reliability reviews, but this is my first experience with one of these newer Cherokees, so I'm excited to check it out here today. This one beside me has 150,000 miles, and we are going to decide if it's likely that it'll make it to 250 or 300,000 miles, and if you should buy one too. We're going to take a walk around the outside, we'll talk about the common problems, and then we're going to decide if the Jeep and Cherokee Trailhawk is a buy or a bust. Starting up front on our Cherokee, and I want to know what you guys think of the design on this. Please let me know, because when these first came out, I thought that they were pretty hideous, putting it nicely. Now they've almost grown on me, and I think in the Trailhawk configuration where they are a little bit more off-road focused, have a different front bumper, I actually kind of like them. They've kind of grown on me now. As far as cosmetic things, the first thing I noticed is there is some rubber up around the windshield that has dried out and cracked. Other things to look out for is not a ton of rust issues, but there has been some that has cropped up underneath the plastic cladding, so you want to check that out. Also, brake lines, fuel lines, there's been a few instances of rust issues there, as well as some on the subframes. None of these things are super common, and unless you're in a really heavy salt use area, you're probably not going to have any issues. This one's super clean, so I don't have a whole lot of concerns about it. Even the headlights and everything like that still shine pretty nice. So cosmetically, it's doing pretty well. Under the hood of our Cherokee, we got the 3.2 liter V6 that makes 271 horsepower and 239 pound-feet of torque. Now, for better or worse, this engine is very similar to the 3.6 liter engine, the Pentastar, that Chrysler, which Jeep is a Chrysler product, uses in a ton of vehicles. However, they also share a lot of the same common problems. The number one issue on these engines by far is oil cooler and oil filter housing failure. This is a one-piece part, and it is right under that cover on the side of the engine over there. And either a quick lube place will crack it because they over tighten the cap, or the gaskets will fail down in the valley of the engine. This part itself is not that expensive. There is a little bit of labor to get down to it, but I will tell you that garages and shops greatly overcharge to replace this part. I think most people could actually do it themselves with the help of a YouTube video, but it is not the simplest of repairs. Most people could do it though in a few hours. Thankfully, there is an aftermarket updated part that eliminates most of the problems with the factory part. If you're looking at a used one of these and you notice an oil smell, or if you look down on this side of the engine and see oil laying on top of the transmission, you almost certainly have a bad oil cooler. If there's an oil smell and you don't see any oil around those areas, it's likely the valve cover gaskets, because those are famous for drying up and seeping a little bit of oil as well. So definitely want to be checking your oil levels commonly on this to prevent any other issues like valve train issues. The valve train is where all of the cams and rocker arms and things are on the top of the engine. And if you start these cars up and you notice a ticking sound coming from the engine and it gets louder when you rev the car up and things, you likely have a failed rocker arm. It's somewhat common on these cars. This engine sounds super smooth, so not an issue here. But if you let that go and it's prolonged, it will also wear into the camshaft, and all of that is quite expensive to replace. Very, very expensive repairs there and in-depth procedures. Now, also around 100,000 miles, and this isn't a problem with the engine itself, but the motor mounts will crack and start to wear out. The rubber inside just degrades, and then the engine will have a little bit more movement inside there. It'll get a little bit clunky as you're driving it, and will definitely affect your driving experience. Again, this is not a super expensive repair. It is common on most cars, but these do wear out a little bit earlier. Last thing, if you're looking at one of these used and engine sounds good, no ticking coming from it or anything like that, just make sure you let the engine get up to temp and there's no low coolant, doesn't smell like coolant, anything like that. There has been some reports of head gasket issues on these. It's not overly common, but is something that will pop up from time to time. Now, once you get up to around 125,000 miles, if you have a check engine light, something like that, or it's not running very well, a lot of times coil packs will go bad right around 125,000 miles. Not an expensive repair either, but definitely something that could pop up. This engine now is mated to a 9-speed automatic transmission, and this is definitely a trouble area on these cars. There has been some failures, but truly the actual failure rate I don't know is that high on them. But problem shifting, hard shifting, and just general odd behavior from the transmission is extremely common, even at low mileage. There also is some issues with like delayed engagement, especially into reverse. You put it in reverse and it either makes a sound or it just doesn't go in right away. There's some problems in a service bulletin. Actually, I think there's a recall as well for the valve body because that was such a prevalent issue. Now, they did update the part and that shouldn't be an issue any longer, but it's definitely something to look out for because it's very common. You can drain and fill the fluid every once in a while, and that does sometimes help the shifting. And other things like a transmission relearn, you can look up the procedure on YouTube for that, will help from time to time, but sometimes there's also just worn clutches inside the transmission and nothing you do is really gonna help. You can also take it back to the dealer and have them reflash the software for the transmission. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. Last thing I'll add about the transmission is take it on a good long test drive and make sure that it is not slipping. I'm not terribly concerned about the odd shifts because they're so prevalent on these cars. But if it is slipping, there is worn components inside the transmission that will require rebuild or replacement before long. So just make sure the engine's not revving up to crazy speeds or something like that. And you should be good to go, even though it may be a little bit of an annoyance as your daily driver. Now, this is a Trailhawk and it is off-road focused, so let's talk about the four-wheel drive system. Four-wheel drive system, generally reliable. There can be some issues with the power transfer unit, which sends power to the rear wheels. So take the car on a nice flat paved surface and drive it with the wheels turned as hard as you can and just see if there's any grinding, strange clunks, anything like that coming from underneath the vehicle, because that would indicate a failed power transfer unit, and that is an expensive part that you do not want to be replacing. Moving on to the interior of the Cherokee here, and I think this is one of the bright spots for Jeeps in general. I think they've done really nice jobs on the interiors of their cars recently, and they feel a little bit more luxurious or higher end than some of the other options out there on the market. Everything is worn pretty nicely for being 150,000 miles now, and I don't really see much wear or tear to talk about. Yes, of course, the seats don't look like they are brand new at this point, neither does the leather on the steering wheel, but even the buttons aren't rubbed off, anything like that, and they always have a fair amount of features and nice screens and things. As far as things to look out for electronics-wise, I don't have a lot to say either. There can be some glitches with the infotainment system. This is before they switched over some of their newer stuff, which actually, in a lot of ways, I like these better because they have less issues than some of the newer Chrysler products, but they still can glitch out and freeze or have Bluetooth connectivity issues, things like that. One of the things with this being a Trailhawk that is pretty awesome is if you go to the center down here, you will notice all the four-wheel drive modes, including a rear differential locker, which is pretty cool for an SUV of this size. Overall, just sitting in here, I think it's extremely comfortable, well laid out, well thought out, and I really could enjoy using this as a daily driver with no issues. Moving on to the rear seat of our Trailhawk here, and this is obviously a smaller SUV. It's not going to be massive. This seat is where I would sit up front at 5'9". My head, I have probably 4 or 5 inches at least to the ceiling, and legroom, I'm pretty decent. It's not a huge space, but the seat sits up high and is very comfortable. It seats better than most, and it has the same materials on the door panel, stuff like that. Not a lot of features, anything. You do have some cup holders. That's about the end of it, but it is actually a very comfortable second row. Moving on to the trunk of the Trailhawk here, you can see that it's got the off-road focused red tow hook on it. You got those on the front as well. And as far as space, pretty decent. It's not a huge area for sure, but again, you're in a smaller SUV, so I really don't have any complaints, and I think you can take most anything you'd need along with you. pulling out onto the road now in our Cherokee, and thankfully I got a nice clear road in front of me so we can get on it a little bit here. Very strong power, actually, and even the transmission shifted okay there. That is one of the odd things, is sometimes the transmission will shift like the smoothest, nicest transmission ever, and then just one day randomly, or you goes through one and it puts your head through the seat for whatever reason. And that's just one of the characteristics of it. It's been common on a couple different Chrysler products, so I'm a little bit used to it. But very good power numbers and feeling for an SUV of this size. I really have no complaints there at all. Now, as far as fuel mileage, which, is pretty important these days, it is 18 in the city, 25 out on the highway. Honestly, I really don't have any complaints about those numbers. I think for an SUV that is off-road focused like this one, I think those are strong numbers. You got good power. I got no complaints there. I will say, as far as important suspension, wear and tear, things like that, I don't have much to tell you guys. It's actually one of the vehicles that I did not see many complaints about. Now, of course, you get up to 150, 200,000 miles. Yes, you're gonna have things wear out in the suspension. That is every car, but nothing really that wears out prematurely. So if you're in one and you're not getting any crazy clunks, the steering feels tight, all those things, you're probably good to go suspension-wise. Pulling back out here, and I'm going to now just accelerate kind of normally just to see if we get any of those weird shifts. Feels good so far. It's still a little odd. Sometimes it'll feel like almost like the engine's like bogging down a little bit, but typical 9-speed characteristics on these cars. I don't feel any slips, anything like that on this car that I would be concerned about if someone was gonna go buy one. And actually, the overall driving experience is pretty good. The steering feels very nice. It's not too heavy, not too light. It centers on the road really well. And like I said, the interior is extremely comfortable. I don't have any complaints there at all. I think it's one of those ones that in fact is factually less reliable than some of the maybe the Japanese competitors out there, even maybe some of the other American competitors out there, but also offers more. Definitely more off-road capability. I think the interior, though, is nicer than a lot of them. And I think the driving could be pretty competitive with just about anybody. Back from the test drive, and now it's time to decide if the Cherokee Trailhawk is a buy or a bust. The test drive went pretty well, and there is a lot to love about these cars. I think they're really nicely optioned, especially obviously in a higher trim level like the Trailhawk. And I think in a lot of ways they actually are nicer inside, interior-wise, and comfort than a lot of other comparable SUVs, especially for the price. And speaking of that, the market on these cars with 150,000 miles is somewhere around $8,000 to $10,000, depending on condition. Now let's talk about some of the concerns I have. My number one concern is actually not the transmission, though that is a big concern. It's probably that oil cooler that sits in the valley of the engine. Those are known to fail pretty frequently. And then I do have concerns about the transmission as well. Not so much that it's going to leave you sit, just the daily driving of it is a little bit difficult at times because of how famous they are for quirky shifting. All that being said, I think it's a car that could possibly make it to 250 or 300,000 miles, but not enough for me to recommend that someone should buy one and expect that. So that's why today I'm going to call the Cherokee Trailhawk a bust. While there is a lot to love, I think they just have too many problems, even small problems, and just typical Jeep quality control issues and things for me to recommend them. Now, if you just needed a fairly modern SUV that you could also take off-road a little bit, it might be a good option for you. They're not terrible. If you have one of these and have had a great experience, I want to hear about it, or if you've had a terrible experience, I want to hear about it, or if there's something that you think I missed, put all that information down in the comments below. I appreciate you following along. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.